The moment Dr. Patricia Williams asked us to share our biggest challenge as a couple, my wife Becca turned to me with tears in her eyes and said, "David, I think Tyler should join our sessions. He understands me in ways you never could, and maybe, if you heard it from him, you'd finally get it." I watched in stunned silence as she pulled out her phone and texted someone right there in the therapist's office. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Within minutes, Tyler Brooks walked through that door like he'd been waiting in the parking lot. He sat down in the chair between us, looked at Dr. Williams, and said, "Thanks for letting me help save their marriage. Becca deserves someone who truly listens." That's when I realized my 6-year relationship wasn't just broken, it had been deliberately sabotaged by the two people I trusted most. My name is David Chen, and until 3 months ago, I thought I was living the American dream in Austin, Texas. Becca and I had met during our senior year at UT, Austin, in a statistics study group where I'd helped her pass her final exam. She was this vibrant marketing major with infectious laughter who could light up any room she entered. I was the quiet computer science guy who preferred debugging code to socializing. But somehow she saw something in me that made her want to stick around. We'd been together for 6 years total, married for 3 of those, and I genuinely believed we were building something beautiful together. Our 2-story house in Westlake Hills had a white picket fence that Becca had insisted on, complete with a garden where she grew herbs for the elaborate dinners she'd cook when she was in good moods. I'd given up a lucrative job offer at Google in Silicon Valley to stay in Austin because Becca had landed her dream position as marketing director at Creative Dynamics, a boutique firm that specialized in luxury brand campaigns. Looking back, now I realize the warning signs were there long before Tyler Brooks entered our lives. Becca had always been what I generously called emotionally expressive. She'd have days where everything I did was wrong, the way I loaded the dishwasher, how I folded her delicate blouses, even the tone I used when asking about her day. Then she'd flip completely and be the loving, affectionate woman I'd fallen for. Apologizing through tears and promising things would be different, I convinced myself this was normal. Every couple had their ups and downs, right? Besides, Becca had warned me early in our relationship that she'd been hurt before. Her college boyfriend had cheated on her with her roommate, Amanda Reed, and the betrayal had left deep scars. She'd made me promise to always be patient with her trust issues, to understand that sometimes her reactions came from a place of old pain rather than anything I'd actually done. So when she started working late with her new colleague Tyler about 8 months ago, I didn't think much of it. Tyler was Creative Dynamics' newest senior account manager, smooth-talking guy from Dallas who'd transferred to Austin to expand his horizons. Becca would come home excited about their brainstorming sessions, how he really got her creative vision in ways her previous colleagues never had. She'd scroll through their work presentations on her laptop while we watched Netflix occasionally, giggling at what she called his brilliant insights. The first time I met Tyler was at Creative Dynamics' annual company barbecue last spring. He was exactly what I'd expected: tall, conventionally handsome, with that effortless charm that seemed to make everyone around him feel like the most interesting person in the world. He wore his confidence like an expensive cologne, just noticeable, enough to make an impression without being overwhelming. When Becca introduced us, he gripped my hand firmly and said, "David, I've heard so much about you. Becca's always talking about how supportive you are of her career. You're a lucky man to have such a passionate, creative wife." Something about the way he emphasized passionate made my skin crawl, but I pushed the feeling aside. Becca beamed at his words, and I told myself I was being paranoid. This was her work environment, her professional life, and she deserved to have colleagues who appreciated her talents. But things started changing at home. Becca became increasingly critical of what she called my emotional unavailability. She'd pick fights about how I didn't ask the right follow-up questions about her day, how I seemed distracted when she talked about work, how I never initiated deep conversations about our relationship. When I tried to engage more, she'd accuse me of being performative, of only paying attention because she'd complained. The arguments always followed the same pattern. She'd start with something small. Maybe I'd forgotten to pick up her dry cleaning or had chosen the wrong wine to go with dinner. Then it would escalate into a broader critique of my character, my emotional intelligence, my ability to be a real partner. I'd apologize, try to explain my perspective, and somehow end up feeling like I was failing at the most basic requirements of being a husband. "You just don't understand me, David," became her favorite refrain. Tyler gets it immediately. When I'm stressed about a campaign, he can read my moods, anticipate what I need. But with you, I have to spell everything out, and even then, you miss the point. I started walking on eggshells, analyzing every interaction for potential landmines. When she'd come home from work energized after spending the day with Tyler, I'd feel this strange mix of relief and resentment. Relief because she was happy. Resentment because I couldn't remember the last time I'd been the source of that kind of joy for her. The suggestion of couples therapy came during one of our worst fights yet. It was a Saturday morning in September, and I'd made the mistake of suggesting we spend the day hiking at Zilker Park instead of going to Tyler's housewarming party. Becca exploded, accusing me of trying to isolate her from her friends and colleagues, of being threatened by her success and the relationships that supported it. "You're so insecure," she'd screamed, throwing a coffee mug that shattered against the kitchen wall. Tyler warned me this might happen. He said some men can't handle their wives having meaningful professional relationships with other men. I told him you were different, but maybe he was right. The fact that she'd been discussing our relationship problems with Tyler felt like a betrayal, but when I tried to express that, she turned it around on me again. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of examining your own behavior, you're trying to control who I can confide in." Tyler's been through marriage counseling himself. He knows what real emotional work looks like. That's when she suggested we see Dr. Patricia Williams, a therapist Tyler had recommended who specialized in communication patterns and attachment styles. I agreed immediately, desperate to save our marriage and convinced that professional help would help Becca see how unfairly she'd been treating me. I genuinely believed that once we were in a neutral environment with an objective third party, we could work through whatever was causing this destructive dynamic. Our first session was scheduled for a Thursday evening in October. Dr. Williams' office was in a sleek medical plaza downtown, all earth tones and soft lighting designed to feel safe and non-threatening. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that made you want to trust her immediately. She explained her approach, how she'd help us identify unhealthy patterns and develop better tools for connecting with each other. "I want you both to feel heard and understood," she said, settling into her chair with a notepad. "Sometimes couples get stuck in cycles where they're talking past each other rather than to each other. My job is to help you break those cycles and rediscover what brought you together in the first place." Becca immediately launched into her grievances. She talked about feeling emotionally neglected, how I prioritized work over our relationship, how I'd become complacent and stopped putting effort into understanding her needs. She spoke with the kind of articulate passion that had first attracted me to her, but now every word felt like an indictment of my character. "David's a good man," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand in a gesture that felt more condescending than affectionate. "But he's never learned how to really connect." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He thinks love is just showing up and paying bills, but emotional intimacy requires so much more than that. When Dr. Williams asked for my perspective, I tried to explain how I felt like nothing I did was ever enough, how the goalposts seemed to constantly shift. But Becca would interrupt with corrections and clarifications, reframing my experiences in ways that made me sound defensive and unreasonable. "See what I mean?" she'd say to Dr. Williams, instead of taking responsibility for his emotional unavailability. "He's trying to make me the problem for having needs." By the end of that first session, I felt more confused and defeated than when we'd started. Dr. Williams assigned us homework daily check-ins where we'd practice active listening and emotional validation. I threw myself into the exercises with the same methodical approach I use for debugging complex code. But somehow I was always doing it wrong, according to Becca. It was during our third session that everything changed. Dr. Williams had been encouraging us to identify the specific moments when we felt most disconnected from each other. Becca was describing how isolated she felt when I'd get absorbed in work projects. And I was genuinely trying to understand her perspective when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "You know what?" she said, turning to face me with tears welling up in her eyes. "I think there's someone who could explain this better than I can. Tyler has been through marriage counseling himself. He's helped me understand so much about emotional intelligence and healthy communication patterns. David, I think Tyler should join our sessions. He understands me in ways you never could, and maybe if you heard it from him, you'd finally get it." My mouth went dry. "You want to bring Tyler to our marriage counseling?" "It's not permanently," she said quickly, though her eyes were already on her phone. "Just for a few sessions. He's studied relationship dynamics, and he's been such a good friend through this difficult time. I think his perspective could really help you understand what I need from a partner." Dr. Williams looked uncomfortable, but before she could respond, Becca was typing rapidly on her phone. "Tyler's in the building, actually. He had some errands to run nearby. I'll just see if he's available to pop in for a few minutes." I stared at my wife in disbelief. "You planned this. You coordinated with him to be here." "I hoped you'd be open to it," she said, not denying the obvious setup. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, David. You're so suspicious and closed off. Tyler would never react this way to someone trying to help his relationship." Before I could process what was happening, there was a soft knock on Dr. Williams' door. Becca practically jumped up to open it, and Tyler Brooks walked in like he'd been waiting in the parking lot the entire time. He was dressed casually, but expensive Lee designer jeans and a button-down shirt that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in 3 months. "Sorry to interrupt," he said with that practiced smile, though his eyes went straight to Becca. "I was grabbing coffee downstairs when I got your text. I hope I'm not overstepping, but if I can help in any way..." Dr. Williams looked between the three of us, clearly trying to navigate an unprecedented situation. This is unusual. Typically, marriage counseling involves just the couple working through their issues together. But what if the couple's issues stem from one person's inability to understand basic emotional needs? Becca asked, settling back into her chair while Tyler remained standing. "I've been trying to explain to David for months what I need from him, but he just doesn't get it. Tyler understands immediately. Maybe he can translate for me." Tyler nodded thoughtfully, and I realized this wasn't spontaneous at all. They'd discussed this scenario probably multiple times. "I don't want to overstep boundaries," he said, though he was already moving toward the empty chair that happened to be positioned between Becca and me. "But I've been through intensive couples therapy myself, and I've learned a lot about communication patterns and emotional availability. If I can help Becca feel heard and understood, I'm happy to contribute." He sat down in the chair between us, and suddenly the entire dynamic of the room shifted. Instead of being across from each other as equals working through our problems, it felt like I was facing a tribunal. Becca and Tyler sat slightly angled toward each other, a united front of emotional sophistication. While I struggled to understand how my marriage counseling session had become a group intervention about my personal failings, "The thing is," Tyler continued, settling comfortably into his role as expert witness, "Becca is an incredibly emotionally intelligent person. She needs a partner who can match that level of depth and awareness. From what she shared with me, David, you tend to approach relationship issues like technical problems to be solved, rather than emotional experiences to be felt and understood." Dr. Williams was taking notes furiously, clearly trying to figure out how to handle this unprecedented situation. "Tyler, while I appreciate your concern for Becca and David's relationship, I should mention that marriage counseling typically works best when both partners are equally committed to growth." Tyler interrupted smoothly, "And that's exactly why I think my perspective might be valuable here. I can help David understand what emotional intimacy actually looks like." I found my voice finally. "I don't think this is appropriate. This is supposed to be marriage counseling. Not whatever this is." Becca's expression immediately hardened. "See what I mean?" she said to Tyler, then turned to Dr. Williams. "This is exactly the defensiveness I was talking about. Instead of being grateful that someone cares enough to help our marriage, he's getting territorial and resistant." "I'm not being territorial," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm being rational. How is bringing your coworker into our private marriage counseling supposed to help us?" Tyler leaned forward with the kind of gentle, condescending smile you'd give a child having a tantrum. David, I understand this might feel threatening to you. Think about it from Becca's perspective. She's been trying to communicate her needs to you for months, maybe years, and she's not feeling heard. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to break through those communication barriers. Thanks for letting me help save their marriage, he said to Dr. Williams, as if this was a completely normal occurrence. Becca deserves someone who truly listens. That phrase, someone who truly listens, hit me like a physical blow. Wasn't just what he said, but the way he said it, with such casual certainty that I was fundamentally inadequate as a husband. And the way Becca nodded along, like Tyler had articulated something she'd been thinking but hadn't been able to express. I looked around that office at Dr. Williams, frantically scribbling notes at Tyler, lounging in his chair like he belonged there. At my wife gazing at him with something that looked disturbingly like gratitude, and I realized that my 6-year relationship wasn't just broken. It had been deliberately sabotaged by the two people I trusted most. The rest of that session passed in a blur of Tyler explaining Becca's emotional needs while she nodded along appreciatively. Dr. Williams trying to redirect the conversation back to healthy therapeutic boundaries, and me sitting there in stunned silence as I watched my marriage counseling turn into a masterclass on why Tyler Brooks would be a better husband than me. When we finally left that office, I didn't say a word during the drive home. Becca chattered excitedly about how breakthrough the session had been, how Tyler had helped her feel truly understood for the first time in months. She didn't seem to notice my silence, or if she did, she chose to interpret it as contemplative rather than devastated. That night, lying in bed next to my wife while she texted Tyler about processing the session, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my marriage had been an illusion. And tomorrow, I'd have to figure out what I was going to do about it. The morning after that disastrous therapy session, I woke up to find Becca already dressed and putting on her makeup at the vanity mirror. She was humming softly, the same tune she used to hum when we first started dating, and everything felt effortless between us. But now the sound made my stomach turn because I knew her good mood had nothing to do with me. I've been thinking about what Tyler said yesterday, she announced without turning around, carefully applying mascara while watching me in the mirror, about how you approach our relationship like a technical problem instead of an emotional experience. He's absolutely right, and I think that's why we keep having the same fights over and over. I sat up in bed, my head still foggy from a night of restless sleep. Becca, can we talk about what happened yesterday? Because bringing Tyler into our marriage counseling without discussing it with me first was exactly what our relationship needed, she interrupted, finally turning to face me. David, for the first time in months, I felt like someone actually understood what I was trying to say. Tyler gets it immediately when I explain something, but with you, it's like I'm speaking a foreign language. She moved to the closet and started selecting her outfit for the day, pulling out a dress I'd never seen before, something sleek and professional. It probably cost more than my monthly car payment. I'm having lunch with Tyler today to debrief about the session. He wants to give me some strategies for communicating with you more effectively. The casual way she announced another private meeting with Tyler made something cold settle in my chest. You're having lunch with him to discuss our marriage? To discuss communication strategies, she corrected, though her tone suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. Tyler has a master's degree in psychology, David. He understands relationship dynamics in ways that could really help us, but only if you're willing to be open to learning. I watched her get ready for work, noting how much more care she was taking with her appearance than usual. The expensive dress, the extra attention to her hair, the perfume I'd bought her for our anniversary, that she rarely wore anymore. She was dressing for Tyler, not for me, and we both knew it. What time will you be home tonight? Asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Tyler suggested we extend the lunch into a working session about emotional intelligence exercises. We could try? I might be late. She kissed my cheek absently, already mentally out the door. Oh, and I made us another appointment with Dr. Williams for Thursday. Tyler can't make it this week, but hopefully by then I'll have some new insights to share. After she left, I sat in our empty house trying to process what my life had become. My wife was having regular meetings with another man to discuss the inadequacies of our marriage, and somehow I was supposed to be grateful for this help. I called in sick to work, something I never did, and spent the day walking around our neighborhood trying to make sense of the situation. Westlake Hills had always felt like a sanctuary to me. The tree-lined streets and well-maintained houses represented the stability Becca and I were building together. But now, everything looked different, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. The white picket fence felt like a facade. The herb garden looked overgrown and neglected. And our house seemed like a stage set for a life that was falling apart behind the scenes. That evening, Becca came home nearly 3 hours later than usual, glowing with excitement about her breakthrough session with Tyler. She'd filled several pages in a notebook with what she called relationship insights, and was eager to share them with me. Tyler helped me understand why I get so frustrated when I try to explain my feelings to you, she said, settling onto the couch with her notebook. It's because you listen to respond rather than listening to understand. You're always trying to fix things instead of just being present with my emotions. She read from her notes like she was delivering a presentation. He taught me this exercise called emotional mirroring, where you repeat back what I've said and validate my feelings before offering any solutions. Want to try it? Stared at my wife reading relationship advice that another man had given her about how to manage me. Felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. Becca, do you realize how this looks? You're getting marriage advice from a man you work with, and then coming home to train me like I'm a poorly behaved pet? Her expression immediately hardened. There it is again. Instead of being grateful that someone cares enough to help us improve our communication, you're making it about your ego. This is exactly what Tyler warned me would happen. Tyler warned you that I'd have a problem with this? He said that emotionally unavailable men often feel threatened when their partners seek support elsewhere because it forces them to confront their own limitations. She was quoting him almost verbatim, I realized. He went through the same thing with his ex-wife before their divorce. The casual mention of Tyler's divorce sent a chill through me. His marriage ended in divorce, and you're taking relationship advice from him. His marriage ended because his wife wasn't willing to do the emotional work, Becca snapped. Unlike me, she gave up instead of fighting for the relationship. I learned from that experience, which is why he's so good at recognizing unhealthy patterns. That night, I lay awake listening to Becca's breathing and wondering when exactly I'd lost my wife to another man. It wasn't a physical affair, at least. I didn't think it was, but somehow what was happening felt worse. Tyler had positioned himself as the expert on our relationship, the translator of Becca's needs, the model of emotional sophistication that I could never match, and she was letting him. The next few weeks followed a predictable pattern. Becca would come home from work full of insights from Tyler about what I was doing wrong and new exercises we could try to fix our communication problems. She'd present these suggestions with the enthusiasm of someone who'd finally found the answer to a puzzle that had been frustrating her for years. But nothing I did was ever quite right. Like if I tried the emotional mirroring exercise, I was being performative. If I asked follow-up questions about her day, I was interrogating her. I gave her space to process her feelings, I was being distant and unavailable. Every interaction became a test I was destined to fail. And with Tyler's ghost hanging over every conversation as the example of how a real man would handle the situation, and my friends started noticing the change in me. Jake Thompson, my best friend, since college, cornered me after our weekly basketball game looking genuinely concerned. Dude, what's going on with you? You've been distracted for weeks, and you look like you haven't slept in days. I wanted to tell him everything, but how? Do you explain that your wife has essentially replaced you with her coworker in every way except legally? That your marriage counseling has become a weekly reminder of your inadequacies delivered by the man your wife wishes she'd married instead? Just some stuff with Becca, I said finally. Marriage counseling is harder than I expected. Jake nodded sympathetically. That's rough, man. But hey, at least you're both willing to work on it. That's got to count for something. I didn't have the heart to tell him that only one of us was actually working on our marriage. The other was working on replacing me with someone better. At work, my performance started suffering. I'd always been the reliable one, the guy who delivered clean code ahead of deadlines and helped troubleshoot other people's problems. But now I found myself staring at my computer screen for hours without accomplishing anything. My mind constantly cycling through conversations with Becca and wondering what she was texting Tyler about. My boss, Stephen Walsh called me into his office on a Friday afternoon looking genuinely worried. "David, I've been watching your output lately, and it's not like you. Is everything okay at home?" Stephen was a good guy, someone who'd always treated his employees like human beings rather than code-generating machines. He'd been through his own divorce a few years earlier and had a reputation for being understanding about personal issues affecting work performance. "Just some relationship stuff," I said, echoing what I'd told Jake. "Nothing that should affect my work, though. I'll get back on track." "Look, I'm not going to pry into your personal life," Stephen said, leaning back in his chair. "But I've been where you are, and I know how marriage problems can mess with your head. If you need some time off or want to talk through anything, my door is always open." His kindness almost broke me. Here was my boss offering support and understanding, while my own wife was systematically undermining my confidence with help from her emotional guru. I thanked him and promised to refocus, but walking back to my desk, I felt more isolated than ever. The breaking point came during our fourth couples therapy session. Dr. Williams had spent the week researching unconventional therapeutic approaches and had decided to allow Tyler to participate again, but with clear boundaries and structured guidelines. She'd obviously never encountered a situation like ours and was improvising as she went along. Tyler arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather portfolio that made him look more like a consultant than someone there to help save someone else's marriage. He'd dressed up for the occasion, slacks and a blazer that probably cost more than I made in a week, and greeted Dr. Williams like they were colleagues rather than therapist and concerned friend. "I've been doing some reading about triangulation in relationships," he announced, settling into what had apparently become his permanent chair. "I think what we're dealing with here is a classic case of emotional dysregulation on David's part, manifested as resistance to feedback and change." I stared at him. "Emotional dysregulation. It's a psychological term," Tyler explained, with the patient tone of a teacher addressing a slow student. "It refers to the inability to manage emotional responses in healthy ways. When someone feels threatened by their partner's growth or outside perspectives, they often react with anger, defensiveness, or withdrawal rather than curiosity and openness." Becca was nodding along like Tyler was delivering profound wisdom. "That's exactly what I was trying to explain to Dr. Williams last week. David gets defensive whenever I bring up areas where he could improve. Instead of seeing it as an opportunity for us to grow together, Dr. Williams looked uncomfortable, but didn't interrupt as Tyler launched into what was essentially a lecture about my psychological shortcomings. He had charts and articles printed out, references to relationship experts I'd never heard of, and a comprehensive analysis of why I was failing as a husband. "The good news," Tyler continued, "is that emotional dysregulation can be treated with the right approach. David, you need to understand that Becca's feedback is coming from a place of love. She wants your marriage to succeed, which is why she's working so hard to help you understand what she needs." I looked around that office again, Tyler presenting his diagnosis of my mental health, at Becca taking notes like she was auditing a college course, at Dr. Williams frantically trying to maintain some semblance of professional boundaries, and realized that I was completely alone in this room. 3 people were discussing my marriage, my psychological state, and my future. And I was the only one who thought there was anything wrong with that scenario. When Tyler started explaining his recommendations for my emotional rehabilitation, something inside me finally snapped. Not into anger, but into a strange kind of clarity. I was watching my wife participate in my systematic humiliation, orchestrated by a man who had inserted himself into our relationship with surgical precision, and everyone expected me to be grateful for it. "This isn't marriage counseling," I said quietly, interrupting Tyler mid-sentence. "This is an intervention designed to convince me that I'm mentally unstable for objecting to my wife's emotionally affair." The room went silent. Tyler's confident expression faltered for just a moment before sliding back into place. Becca's face flushed red with anger. Dr. Williams stopped writing and looked up with genuine alarm. "David," Becca said, her voice dangerously low, "if you're going to sabotage the one thing that might actually help our marriage, then maybe we need to seriously consider whether this relationship is worth saving." And there it was, the threat I'd been waiting for, delivered with Tyler sitting right there as her backup plan. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger who'd been planning my replacement while pretending to work on our marriage. Maybe you're right, I said, standing up from my chair. Maybe we do need to consider that. I walked out of that office knowing that my marriage was over, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was losing. I felt like I was finally waking up. Walking out of Dr. Williams' office felt surreal, like I was moving through water. I could hear Becca calling my name behind me, but her voice sounded distant and hollow. For the first time in months, maybe years, my mind felt completely clear. The fog of confusion and self-doubt that had been clouding my judgment was lifting. And I could finally see the situation for what it really was. I drove home in silence, not even turning on the radio. Our house looked different when I pulled into the driveway, smaller, somehow less significant. The white picket fence that Becca had insisted on now looked like a prop in someone else's play. I sat in my car for several minutes, just staring at this place I'd called home for 3 years, trying to remember when I'd last felt truly comfortable there. Inside, I went straight to my home office and did something I'd never done before. Started documenting everything, not because I was planning some grand revenge, but because I needed to understand how I'd gotten to this point. I opened a new document and began writing down every incident I could remember. Every conversation where I'd felt gaslit or manipulated, every time Tyler's name had come up in our discussions about what was wrong with me. The pattern was staggering once I laid it out chronologically. Tyler had entered our lives 8 months ago, and within weeks, Becca had started comparing me unfavorably to him. The timing of her increasing dissatisfaction with our marriage aligned perfectly with her growing professional relationship with him. She'd begun parroting phrases that sounded nothing like her natural speaking style, using psychological terminology she'd never shown interest in before. I pulled up her social media accounts, something I'd stopped checking months ago because it always made me feel worse about myself. Her Instagram was full of photos from creative dynamics events, team lunches, and brainstorming sessions that always seemed to feature Tyler prominently. In every picture, they were laughing, leaning close together, sharing inside jokes that their captions hinted at but never fully explained. But it was her LinkedIn profile that really opened my eyes. She'd changed her professional summary recently to include language about collaborative leadership and emotional intelligence in the workplace concepts she'd never mentioned before Tyler joined her team. Her posts had shifted from showcasing her own work to promoting articles about healthy workplace relationships and the importance of psychological safety in creative environments. I scrolled through Tyler's social media next, and what I found made my stomach turn. His posts were carefully crafted to present himself as a relationship expert, sharing articles about emotional availability, toxic masculinity, and supporting your partner's growth. He'd written lengthy captions about his own journey through couples therapy, positioning himself as someone who'd done the hard work of becoming emotionally enlightened. But the comments section told a different story. His ex-wife had left several responses over the past few months, and her words painted a very different picture of Tyler Brooks. She'd written things like, "Easy to preach about emotional availability when you're never actually home. I'm still waiting for that apology for the gaslighting. But I guess that would require actual self-reflection." I screenshot everything. Not because I planned to use it as ammunition, but because I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Tyler wasn't the relationship guru he pretended to be. He was a man who'd destroyed his own marriage and was now positioning himself as an expert qualified to fix mine. My phone started ringing around 8 o'clock. Becca's number flashed on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Then Tyler's number appeared. I hadn't even realized she'd given him my contact information. I declined that call too. Called alternately for the next hour, leaving increasingly frustrated voicemails that I didn't bother listening to. Finally, around 9:30, I heard Becca's key in the front door. She came straight to my office, her face flushed with anger and what looked like genuine confusion. "David, what the hell was that? You completely humiliated me in front of Dr. Williams. Tyler was just trying to help. And you made it sound like some kind of conspiracy." I turned away from my computer to face her fully. "How long have you been planning to leave me for Tyler?" Question seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked several times, then let out a forced laugh. "Leave you for Tyler? David, that's Completely insane. Tyler is a colleague and a friend. We're not having an affair. I didn't say you were having an affair, I replied calmly. I asked how long you've been planning to leave me for him, because everything about the last 8 months suggests you've been systematically replacing me with someone you think is better. Becca sat down in the chair across from my desk, and for a moment, she looked genuinely vulnerable. David, I'm not trying to replace you. I'm trying to help you become the best version of yourself. Tyler has shown me what emotional maturity looks like, and I want that for us. By bringing him into our marriage counseling to explain my psychological defects. By getting help from someone who understands relationship dynamics better than either of us do. Her voice was rising now, frustration bleeding through her attempted patience. Tyler went through intensive therapy after his divorce. He's learned things about communication and emotional intelligence that could really help us. But you're so threatened by his success that you can't see past your own insecurity. I pulled up Tyler's ex-wife's comments on my computer screen and turned the monitor toward Becca. His success? According to his ex-wife, Tyler is emotionally unavailable, manipulative, incapable of taking responsibility for his own behavior. Does that sound like someone we should be taking relationship advice from? Becca glanced at the screen, then waved dismissively. Bitter ex-wives say horrible things, David. You can't believe everything you read on social media, Tyler told me all about how vindictive she became during their divorce. She's been stalking his online presence and trying to sabotage his reputation ever since. Or, I said, she's telling the truth about a man who destroyed their marriage and is now trying to destroy ours. Tyler isn't destroying our marriage, Becca snapped. You are, with your jealousy, your resistance to growth, your inability to accept help when it's offered. Tyler has been nothing but supportive of our relationship. I stared at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 6 years, and realized that she genuinely believed what she was saying. Tyler had positioned himself so skillfully that she couldn't see his manipulation. Every criticism of me, every suggestion for improvement, every psychological insight had been delivered through her, making her feel like the expert rather than the victim. Becca, I said quietly, when was the last time you defended me to someone? The question seemed to confuse her. What do you mean? When was the last time someone criticized me and you stood up for me? When did you last tell someone that? I was a good husband, a good man, someone worth believing in. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her mentally scrolling through recent conversations. David, I'm not going to lie to people about our problems just to protect your ego. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking when you last saw something good in me worth defending. The silence stretched between us, and in that quiet space, I think we both realized that our marriage had been over for longer than either of us wanted to admit. She'd stopped seeing me as someone worthy of protection or advocacy. I'd become a project to be fixed rather than a partner to be loved. I think, I said finally, we need to take a break from each other. A break? Becca's voice cracked. Slightly, David. We're in therapy. We're working on things. You can't just give up because the process is challenging. This isn't therapy, Becca. This is you and Tyler tag-teaming to convince me that I'm psychologically defective. And I'm done participating in my own demolition. I stood up and moved to our bedroom, pulling a suitcase from the closet. Becca followed me, watching in stunned silence as I started packing clothes. Where are you going? To a hotel? I need some space to think without being told every day how inadequate I am as a human being. David, this is ridiculous. You're having an emotional breakdown over nothing. Tyler was just trying to help. I paused in my packing and looked at her directly. If Tyler cares so much about helping our marriage, why hasn't he ever encouraged you to see my perspective? Why is every solution about how I need to change, never about how your behavior might be contributing to our problems? Becca opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time in months, she seemed to be actually considering my words rather than immediately formulating a rebuttal. Tyler says, I don't care what Tyler says, I interrupted. Tyler isn't your husband? Tyler doesn't live here, doesn't pay these bills, doesn't wake up next to you every morning trying to figure out how to make you happy. Tyler gets to swoop in with his psychology degree and his relationship wisdom without any of the actual work or commitment of being in this marriage. I zipped the suitcase closed and headed for the door. When you're ready to work on our marriage with just the two people who are actually in it, call me. Till then, I'm not participating in this circus anymore. The hotel I chose was a modest, extended stay near downtown Austin. Nothing fancy but clean and quiet. I checked in under my own name, not trying to hide from Becca, but not particularly eager to be found either. The room was generic and impersonal, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I ordered room service and spent the evening going through my phone, deleting Tyler's number and blocking him on all social media platforms. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. So I called my old friend Marcus in Seattle, a guy I'd worked with at my previous job who'd been trying to recruit me to his startup for the past year. David, man, it's been forever. Please tell me you're finally ready to come work for a real tech company. Marcus's enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time in months, I found myself genuinely laughing. Actually, Marcus, I might be interested in hearing more about that position. We talked for 2 hours about his company, the work they were doing, the life he'd built in Seattle. It wasn't until after we hung up that I realized how long it had been since I'd felt excited about anything. Becca and Tyler had been so focused on everything wrong with me that I'd forgotten I was actually good at things, that other people valued my skills and enjoyed my company. My phone buzzed with a text from Becca. David, please come home. Need to talk about this rationally. Tyler thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown, and he knows a therapist who specializes in male emotional disorders. He'd stared at that message for a long time. Even now, even with me gone, she was consulting Tyler about my mental health and accepting his recommendations for my treatment. She couldn't even see how inappropriate it was. I deleted the message without responding and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, I would start making some real changes in my life. But tonight, for the first time in 8 months, I was going to sleep. Without anyone telling me how I could be better, 3 days into my hotel stay, I made a decision that would change everything. I was sitting in the lobby with my laptop, finally feeling productive for the first time in months, when my phone rang. It was an unknown Austin number, but something made me answer. David, this is Amanda Reed. I think we need to talk. Amanda Reed, Becca's former best friend and roommate from college, the one whose boyfriend had cheated on her with Becca years ago. The woman Becca had painted as bitter and vindictive. Someone who couldn't handle losing and had made Becca's life miserable out of pure spite. I know this is weird, Amanda continued, but I've been following what's happening with you and Becca on social media. Tyler Brooks posted something about helping friends through relationship challenges, and frankly, it made me sick to my stomach. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? Can we meet somewhere? There are things about Becca and Tyler that you need to know, and I'd rather not discuss them over the phone. We agreed to meet at the Grove Coffee Shop, a neutral location downtown that neither Becca nor I frequented. I arrived first and claimed a corner table, nervous about what Amanda might tell me, but desperate for any information that might help me understand what had happened to my marriage. Amanda walked in exactly on time, and I recognized her immediately. Despite not having seen her in years, she was shorter than Becca, auburn hair and an air of quiet confidence that was completely different from my wife's more dramatic presence. She spotted me right away and approached with a warm but serious expression. David, thank you for agreeing to meet. I know this must be strange, especially given what Becca's probably told you about me. We ordered coffee and made small talk for a few minutes before Amanda got to the point. I need you to know that everything Becca told you about our falling out is a lie. Her boyfriend didn't cheat on her with me. I caught them together and told her what I'd seen, trying to help her. But instead of being grateful, she turned the whole thing around and convinced everyone that I was the homewrecker who'd seduced her innocent boyfriend. I felt a chill run down my spine. That's not what she told me. I'm sure it's not. Becca has always been gifted at rewriting history to make herself the victim. But David, there's more you need to know about Tyler Brooks. He didn't just randomly transfer to Austin for career advancement. He came here specifically because Becca reached out to him. Amanda pulled out her phone and showed me a series of screenshots. They were LinkedIn messages between Becca and Tyler, dating back almost a year. The conversation started innocuously enough with Becca commenting on an article Tyler had shared about marketing strategies. But quickly, the tone became more personal. "I've been thinking about what you said at Sarah's wedding about emotional intelligence in relationships," one of Becca's messages read. "My husband is a good man, but sometimes I feel like we're speaking different languages." Tyler's response was immediate and perfectly calculated. "That's so common in marriages where one partner has grown emotionally and the other hasn't. Have you considered that you might have outgrown the relationship?" I scrolled through months of messages, watching as Tyler systematically validated every complaint Becca had about our marriage, while positioning himself as the enlightened alternative. He'd recommended books, shared articles, and gradually convinced her that her dissatisfaction wasn't normal marriage challenges, but evidence that she was trapped with an emotionally stunted partner. "How did you get these?" I asked Amanda, Tyler's ex-wife Jennifer. She and I connected after she started commenting on his social media posts. Turns out Tyler used the exact same playbook on their marriage. He identified a woman who was feeling disconnected from her husband, positioned himself as an expert on relationships, and slowly convinced her that her problems were all due to her partner's inadequacy. Amanda showed me more screenshots, these from Jennifer's phone. Tyler had used nearly identical language with both women. The same psychological terminology, the same references to his supposed expertise. He'd even recommended the same books and articles to both Becca and Jennifer. Jennifer says Tyler makes a hobby of targeting married women who are going through rough patches. He presents himself as the emotionally evolved alternative, breaks up the marriage, and then moves on to the next victim once the novelty wears off. My hands were shaking as I processed this information. So this was all planned? From the beginning, Tyler researched Becca's background, found out about our falling out, and used it to bond with her over being misunderstood by people who couldn't handle her success. He probably knew about your relationship challenges before he even applied for the job at Creative Dynamics. Amanda pulled up Tyler's employment history on her phone. Look at this. He's worked at 6 different companies in the past 8 years, always leaving after 12 to 18 months. And according to Jennifer, there were always rumors about inappropriate relationships with married colleagues. I thought about all the times Becca had come home glowing after her sessions with Tyler. How she'd started using phrases that didn't sound like her natural voice. How she'd gradually become more critical of everything I did while holding Tyler up as an example of emotional sophistication. "There's more," Amanda said quietly. Jennifer told me that Tyler's been documenting his interactions with Becca. Screenshots of their conversations, recordings of phone calls, photos from their work meetings. He keeps files on all his targets. For what purpose? Control? Insurance. Jennifer thinks he might be planning to blackmail Becca once he gets bored with her. Or he could be building a portfolio to use with future victims. Either way, your wife is being manipulated by someone who's done this before and will do it again. I stared at Amanda across the coffee shop table, feeling like my entire reality had shifted once again. "Why are you telling me this?" "Despite everything that happened between Becca and me, I don't want to see her destroy her life for a predator. And because you deserve to know the truth about what's been done to your marriage." Amanda handed me a flash drive. Everything's on here. The LinkedIn messages, Jennifer's documentation of Tyler's pattern, employment records, even some audio recordings that Jennifer made during their divorce proceedings where Tyler admits to manipulating her feelings. I pocketed the flash drive, my mind racing with possibilities. What am I supposed to do with this? That's up to you. But David, you should know that Tyler's planning something big. Jennifer overheard him on a phone call last week talking about making his move soon. He's been patient, but he's ready to escalate. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Becca. Tyler suggested we do an intervention. "For you, tomorrow. Dr. Williams agrees that your behavior is concerning. Please come home so we can help you." I showed the message to Amanda, who shook her head grimly. An intervention. That's exactly what he did to Jennifer. He convinced her entire family that her husband was having a mental breakdown and needed professional help. By the time Jennifer realized what was happening, Tyler had isolated her from everyone who might have supported her marriage. I felt a cold fury building in my chest, different from the confused anger I'd been carrying for months. This wasn't about my inadequacy as a husband or my inability to meet Becca's emotional needs. This was about a systematic campaign to destroy my marriage, orchestrated by a man who'd done it before and would do it again. Amanda, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need you to come to this intervention tomorrow. It's my support person. Amanda's eyes widened. David, I don't think that's a good idea. Becca will lose her mind if I show up. Exactly. I need Tyler to see that I'm not the isolated, mentally unstable victim he thinks I am. And I need Becca to confront the lies she's been telling about you in front of witnesses. Amanda was quiet for a moment, considering. You're planning to expose everything. I'm planning to give them exactly what they're giving me, an intervention. Except mine will be based on actual evidence instead of manipulation. We spent the next hour planning. Amanda would arrive at Dr. Williams' office 15 minutes after the session started, claiming that I'd asked her to join as emotional support. She'd bring printed copies of all the evidence we'd gathered, including the timeline of Tyler's previous relationship destructions and the documented pattern of his manipulation tactics. Are you sure about this? Amanda asked as we prepared to leave. Once you detonate this bomb, there's no going back. I thought about the past 8 months, about watching my wife fall under the influence of a predator who'd targeted our marriage for sport, about sitting in therapy sessions while Tyler diagnosed my psychological defects, about being gaslit into believing that my reasonable objections to his interference were evidence of my emotional dysfunction. I'm sure, I said. Tyler Brooks has destroyed his last marriage. That evening, I called Dr. Williams directly to confirm the appointment time and location. She sounded surprised to hear from me. David, I'm glad you called. Becca and Tyler are both very concerned about your mental state. They think you might be having some kind of breakdown. Dr. Williams, tomorrow's session is going to be different from what you're expecting. I'm bringing some documentation that I think will change your perspective on what's been happening in my marriage. David, I understand that you're feeling defensive about the feedback you've been receiving, but running away to a hotel isn't a healthy way to process. I'm not having a breakdown, I interrupted. I'm having a breakthrough. And tomorrow, everyone else will too. I hung up and spent the rest of the evening reviewing the evidence Amanda had given me. Tyler's pattern was so clear when laid out chronologically that I couldn't believe I'd missed it before. But that was the point. He was skilled at making his manipulation look like help. His interference seemed like expertise. Tomorrow, his carefully constructed facade would crumble. My wife would finally see what she'd chosen over our marriage. I arrived at Dr. Williams' office 30 minutes early, sitting in my car and watching the parking lot like I was preparing for battle. At exactly 4:45, Becca's silver Honda pulled up, followed immediately by Tyler's black BMW. They walked into the building together, their body language so synchronized it looked like they'd rehearsed it. 15 minutes later, I made my entrance. The receptionist directed me to Dr. Williams' office, where I found the three of them already deep in conversation. They stopped talking abruptly when I walked in, and I could feel the weight of their collective concern pressing down on me. David, Dr. Williams said with forced cheerfulness, "We're so glad you decided to join us. Becca and Tyler have been sharing some observations about your recent behavior that we'd like to discuss." Tyler had positioned himself in his usual chair, between Becca and where I would sit, a leather folder open on his lap, filled with what looked like printed articles and handwritten notes. He was dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, every inch the successful professional who had his life together. "Before we start," I said, remaining standing, "I'd like to bring in someone for support." Amanda Reed should be here any minute. The color drained from Becca's face. "Amanda, David, what are you talking about?" "Amanda has nothing to do with our marriage. Actually, she has everything to do with it," I replied, checking my watch. "She's been very helpful in providing context about some patterns I've been researching." Tyler's confident expression flickered for just a moment before sliding back into place. David, bringing in someone from Becca's past who clearly has unresolved issues with her seems counterproductive to healing. He was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Dr. Williams looked confused, but got up to answer it. Amanda stepped into the room, carrying a manila folder and wearing a calm, professional demeanor that immediately shifted the energy in the space. "I'm sorry I'm late," Amanda said, her eyes scanning the room and landing on Becca with a small, knowing smile. Traffic was terrible. Becca's face had gone from pale to flushed red. "What is she doing here, David? This is completely inappropriate. Amanda is the last person who should be involved in our marriage counseling." "Funny," Amanda said, settling into the remaining chair with complete composure. "I was thinking the same thing about Tyler." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler was staring at Amanda with barely concealed alarm, clearly trying to figure out what she knew and how much danger he was in. Dr. Williams looked like she was questioning every decision that had led to this moment. "Dr. Williams," I said, finally taking my seat before we discuss my alleged mental breakdown. "I think everyone should see some information that Amanda helped me gather." I pulled out the printed evidence Amanda had given me, spreading it across the coffee table like playing cards. LinkedIn message, screenshots, employment records, testimonials from Tyler's ex-wife, and a detailed timeline of his relationship. Destruction pattern. "Tyler Brooks isn't a relationship expert," I announced. "He's a predator who targets married women, convinces them their husbands are emotionally deficient, and breaks up marriages for sport." Becca grabbed one of the LinkedIn printouts, her hands shaking as she read her own words back to Tyler from months before they'd supposedly met. "These are private messages. How did you get these?" "Jennifer Brooks," Amanda said simply. "Tyler's ex-wife? She's been documenting his pattern for years, hoping to warn future victims." Tyler finally found his voice. "This is completely fabricated. Bitter ex-wife creating fake evidence to damage my reputation. David, I understand you're feeling threatened, but this conspiracy theory is supported by employment records. From 6 companies, testimonials from 3 different women, and audio recordings of you admitting to manipulation tactics during your divorce proceedings," I interrupted, sliding another set of documents across the table. Dr. Williams picked up the employment records, scanning them with growing alarm. "Tyler, you told us you'd been with Creative Dynamics for 2 years. According to this, you started there 8 months ago. And according to this," Amanda added, pulling out her phone, "you researched Becca's social media for months before applying for that job. Jennifer found your browser history during the divorce. Facade was crumbling in real time. Tyler's carefully constructed persona was falling apart under the weight of documented evidence, and everyone in the room could see it happening. But it was Becca's reaction that surprised me most. Instead of defending Tyler or denying the evidence, she was staring at the LinkedIn messages with dawning horror. "You've been planning this since before we met. Every conversation, every piece of advice, every criticism of David was all calculated." "Becca, you're letting them manipulate you," Tyler said desperately. "This is exactly what I warned you about." David's enlisted his ex-girlfriend to create elaborate lies because he can't handle the truth about his emotional inadequacy. "I'm not his ex-girlfriend," Amanda said calmly. "I'm the woman whose relationship you convinced Becca to destroy in college using the exact same tactics you've been using on her marriage." The room went completely silent. Dr. Williams was frantically taking notes, trying to process the complete reversal of everything she thought she understood about our situation. Becca was reading through message after message, seeing how Tyler had systematically validated every complaint while planting new seeds of doubt about our marriage. "You made me believe I was outgrowing my relationship," Becca whispered, still staring at the evidence. "You convinced me that David was holding me back, that I deserved someone more emotionally evolved." "You do deserve better," Tyler said, but his voice lacked the confident authority it had carried for months. "David is exactly the kind of man who what?" I interrupted. "Who loves his wife enough to work on their marriage instead of sabotaging it. Who doesn't target vulnerable women for psychological manipulation." Tyler stood abruptly, his composure finally shattered completely. "This is insane. You're all insane. Becca, you know what we have together. You know how David makes you feel versus how I make you feel. Made me feel like I was going crazy," Becca said quietly. "Like everything wrong in my marriage was David's fault and everything right was because of your guidance." Dr. Williams cleared her throat, clearly struggling to regain control of her session. "Tyler, I think it would be best if you left. This evidence raises serious concerns about your involvement in David and Becca's therapy." Tyler looked around the room at four faces that no longer believed his carefully crafted narrative. His mask had slipped completely, revealing the calculating predator underneath. Without another word, he grabbed his leather folder and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed felt different from any quiet we'd shared before. It wasn't tense or awkward. It was empty, like the space left behind after a storm finally passes. "David," Becca said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am so sorry." But I was already shaking my head. The apology I needed was, 8 months ago, before you let another man convince you I wasn't worth defending. 6 weeks later, I was boarding a plane to Seattle. Marcus had come through with an even better job offer than we'd discussed, and I'd accepted without hesitation. Becca had tried to reconcile, promising she could see clearly now and wanted to rebuild our marriage without outside interference. But the damage wasn't just about Tyler's manipulation. It was about how easily she'd been convinced to tear down everything we'd built together. How quickly she'd believed that I was the problem holding her back from happiness. Amanda drove me to the airport, having become an unexpected friend through the whole ordeal. "Any regrets?" she asked, as we pulled up to departures. I thought about it honestly. I regret that it took me so long to see what was happening, but I don't regret leaving. As my plane lifted off from Austin, I felt something I hadn't experienced. In years' excitement about the future, I was heading toward a new job, a new city, and a new life where I wouldn't have to earn my worth every single day. 3 months later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Becca letting me know that Tyler had been fired from Creative Dynamics after 2 other women came forward with similar stories of manipulation. He'd moved on to Dallas, probably already identifying his next target. I deleted the message without responding and went back to my new life, where nobody questioned my emotional intelligence or suggested I needed fixing, where I was valued for who I was rather than criticized for who I wasn't. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.